Every year people die from storms, but it's not usually the snow that gets them. Power goes out, no heat, no way to charge your phone, no way to call for help. And most of them thought they'd be fine. So today I'd like to talk about alternative backup power options for the common man. So a lot of people understand that things like Generac and things like that, you can get on there and you can get some really good options for backup generators. In today's video, I don't really want to cover these options because everyone knows that they can get these. You can get all sorts of different options, and these are really, really nice because it supplies you with clean energy and you can get them as big as you want. The downsides to these is that they're not portable, so you can't take them where you need them. And secondly, they're very costly. And thirdly, you have to pay somebody to wire them into your house. So when me and my wife lived on our other farm, we had a backup generator there, and it was nice because it's plugged directly into the house. If the power ever goes out, you just flip the switch and you're on the generator. Now, the downside was that we had to run that generator fairly often just to make sure that it's still running, because everyone knows that if something doesn't run, it deteriorates quickly. So a common misconception is that some of these old machines like this could actually power your house. I've had quite a few people ask me, well, why can't this be your backup generator? Unfortunately, these older machines like this ran on complete DC, and there was no way even your grinder had to be an AC/DC grinder in order to be okay. Now, a lot of the newer machines actually, the newer Lincolns actually started to get converted over to where you could run common AC products, like you could run like a skill saw or something like that without damaging the motor. But even those newer machines on some of the Lincolns and things were actually still mostly DC power, because DC is going to be your best source of welding. But there's not enough conversion, there's not enough actual AC power to run your house. So if you're using a welding machine, then make sure you check and see what it's going to be like. Does it have the capability? Just because it says it has that wattage capacity doesn't mean that it necessarily has enough AC watts. So make sure you check that. Now, with that being said, a really good option, I think, for most people to consider, especially if you live in a rural community, or if you live out in the country at all, or if you have a farm or anything like that, is some type of welding machine. But hear me out. These Lincoln machines are mostly DC. That's why they're some of the best welding machines, okay? There's a lot of machines like Miller. Miller's some of my favorite for this. And then even Hobart. I don't like Hobart as much. I don't think that they're built as quality, but we're going to get into some reasons why you would choose a Miller or a Hobart. They might be right for everyone, depending on what your needs are. So a Miller and a Hobart are both going to be machines that are mostly AC and then converted to DC, whereas these machines are DC, and then the newer ones are DC converted to AC just for that little power outlet, okay? So because of that, because those Millers and those Hobarts, like I said, do your own research on which one specifically if this is what you're wanting to do. But a lot of these Millers and Hobarts, and maybe even all of them, are primarily an AC generator converted over to DC for the welding part, which means that they usually make fairly decent generators depending on the size. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have big enough to power your house. A lot of times, like these Generac generators and other brands as well, you're going to have a generator that's putting out like 20,000 watts. So these options that I'm talking about are going to be like a 10,000 watt or a 12,000 watt. I personally, as far as a welding machine goes, I really like the Miller Trailblazer machines. Those are professional grade machines. They're actually cleaner electricity. Whether or not they're good enough for things like your laptop and stuff, I'm not sure on, so I would check those specs out. But they are considered cleaner electricity, okay? And they usually are a little bit more quality. They last a little bit more time. But their boards are a bit pricey if they ever go out, and the machine itself is a bit more pricey. So if you're not needing something that really does some decent welding quality, I would go with something more like a Bobcat. A Bobcat is still a good option. They're still a pretty decent machine. They're not going to be quite as clean, but they are dependable and they're good machines. Their weld quality is not going to be quite as good, but it's plenty good for most people. The Hobart, you might end up with some cheaper options with the Hobart. Your wattage may start to go down at this point, okay? And look, keep in mind, not everybody needs to power their entire house, okay? If your goal is to power your entire house, no matter what, and you need an easy, convenient system, then go with that, okay? But this gives you the option of portability. When we had the generator at the other farm, one of the big problems is if we had a warehouse with freezers of meat, because we run a business, a meat market business, and if our warehouse is separate from our house, and that warehouse generator goes down, okay, and we've got a generator at our warehouse and a generator at our house, like assuming that we did. If the warehouse generator goes down, that means that I need to keep those freezers going no matter what, because that's going to be more important than my house. Well, if my house generator is tied to my house specifically, and then my warehouse generator goes out, I have no ability to detach this house generator, as nice as it may be, and bring it over here to my warehouse and save thousands and thousands of dollars of meat. Now, that's an example that not everybody will have, but I think it brings the point across that the portability is something that a lot of us should be looking into. Not to mention, a lot of us don't necessarily want to, or we can afford the niceties of something like a Generac or something else. By the way, I'm not being sponsored by any of these companies. This is my own personal video. I'm just trying to throw some good information out there to help y'all out. I really like the welding machine option for most people. I feel like that's one of the best options. The portability, the ability to use it no matter where you're at. I can go, right now I can take my generator like that. I can take it out way out in the pasture, and I can run a skill saw out in the pasture. I can run whatever I want. Now, I get that we have battery pack tools and stuff, and that's changing the world. It really is. But the portability of that power, being able to put some gas in there and you're good to go, you can run as long as you want, as long as you have gas. That's a big deal. All right, so that's not the only option, and it's not for everybody. But I would definitely look into one of those options. Decide who you are. Are you somebody that welds a lot, or are you somebody that just maybe would weld a little bit and you're looking for a decent generator? Figure out who you are in that one in order to figure out which generator to get. If you're not in the welding machine category, if you live in a kind of a little bit more of a suburb or something like that, or if you just know I'm never going to weld, or I'm only welding indoors, maybe you have a MIG machine or something like that, and you just don't think that option makes any sense, there's a lot of decent portable generators. You get on here, there's a whole bunch of different ones. But this one right here, these Hondas, these are raved by a lot of people. Now, I want to say this very clearly. I have not used any of these personally. I have considered buying one of these Honda generators because they're considered to be some of the absolute best portable generators, okay? But they are a little bit more pricey, and for some people, I mean, every one of these is a valuable option for somebody, and I think no matter who you are, you need some type of backup generator. Now, where these generators shine over certain things, you can throw this thing in the back of your truck. There's no reason why you can't put something like that in the back of your truck. You can use it on a side business that you have, a side hustle. If you have a rental property and you just need to get some power there for whatever reason, you can take it over there. And its portability, unlike a weld machine that's big and cumbersome and needs its own trailer or something like this, you could put this in the back of a car, if you had to. It's not that difficult to put it somewhere like that. And realistically, guys, those are not that pricey. I mean, there's quite a few of y'all that would really make sense to have, even if you had some of the other things. Now, if you had a weld machine or something like that, it might not make sense for you. But for quite a few people, I think that would make sense. And like I said, it's not an expensive option. And I'm always surprised, because when a storm comes, it's not that surprising when a storm's coming to see milk and bread disappear. Okay, that's not that surprising. You can't stock up huge amounts of milk and bread. But what always surprises me is when I see large amounts of meat or generators or things like that disappear. Those are things that every person, by this point, especially since the last 4 years, we've seen some pretty major storm activities. And just in my whole lifetime, I mean, there's been enough storms. It's not that uncommon. I remember one time when I was younger, we had a big ice storm. I think it was 2000, the year of 2000. We were out of power for 2 whole weeks. And I wish we would have had some of these better options. So my point is they're not that expensive, and it always surprises me when I see people go and empty the shelves, which means that there's a big portion of people that don't have this. And I understand some people are buying them and then returning them, hoping to never ever have to keep that in there, but you're running a big risk, by doing that. So have something that you can afford. All right, so now I want to go into some other options that I think every single person should have, whether you have an awesome generator. I don't care if you have a Generac. I don't care if you have one of the best home generators around. And I don't even care if you have that plus a backup weld machine generator and then one of these Porterbuilt generators. This right here, every single person should have some version of this. All right, guys, so before I go into that, I want to tell a quick story. This last storm that we had, I put out a short video on that. We had people stuck on the interstate for 30 hours. And the reason they were stuck on that interstate is because they were trying to get out of their homes. It's not like they were out trying to play around in the snow. Their homes actually went out of power, and there were so many homes that went out of power. They were trying to get somewhere warm. And they all started heading that way at the same time, obviously, because catastrophe usually strikes everybody all at one time. And that's something you have to remember, is even if you think you're prepared, it's striking everybody all at one time, and it's usually going to be a lot worse than what you prepared for, okay? So all of these people are stuck on the interstate. They didn't have any source of warmth or power until people started bringing it to them. And I had a little deal that I talked about how that worked out. But then there were a number of people that talked to me. I even had some people calling and asking me to come help them, and I couldn't help them at the time because I was actually in California when it happened. They were letting me know that they were actually stuck in their house with no power, no way to get to anyone, and their phones. This is the worst part. They only had so much battery power on their phone, okay? They only had some. This is not everybody, but this is some of the people that I'm talking about. I heard similar stories quite a bit. These people had no way to charge their phones. So once their phone power went out, now luckily this only lasted for a few hours, for 30 hours or so, which is long enough to be cold. They slept several nights cold. They had no way to stay warm, okay? But if their phones would have completely died, and this would have lasted for 2 weeks, I shudder to think what could have happened to some people in freezing cold houses, trapped in their house, no warmth, and no way to call. So these next options I'm going to show you, I think everybody should have. All right, guys, so this is one of the options. This is not the option, but this is one thing that every single person should have. This is a very small inverter, okay? You are going to be able, you have this, obviously you can plug it into your cigarette lighter, but you can also directly hook it to your battery, okay? Now what this gives you, of course, if you don't have the ability to hook up any type of power right to your cigarette lighter, then that's going to give you that. But the main thing that these give you is they give you more watts than what you would get if you just plugged something directly into your cigarette lighter. You're going to be able to draw more watts, okay? So that's why every single person should have one of these. This did not cost me very much. Now this was, I think, 6 or so years ago, and I think it was only 30 bucks maybe. That's why, I mean, they're so cheap, you should have this. And one reason you should have it is because not all generators are created equal. Even some of the weld machines and stuff we talked about, they're not necessarily going to be clean energy. And I'm about to go into what I mean by clean energy. But these, like, if you go to Generac or some of your, I'm using Generac because that's who, my family has used, but that's not necessarily, I'm not telling you to go use that one. But my point is any of these big generator companies, they're going to be a clean energy, okay, that you can plug in a phone or you can plug in a computer or something like that, and you don't have to worry about it hurting your computer. Some of your generators, you do your research and find out what you have, but some of your generators are going to not be safe for any type of power like that, plugging in a laptop or something like that. Now, most of you are going to say right now, well, if all I really need is to be able to go and just charge a phone, why can't I just go out to my car and plug it in and charge my phone? You absolutely can, and quite a few people were able to do that. There was one of the ladies that I'm talking about, both of her vehicle batteries were dead on her car. She was unable to even use her car to charge her phone. This right here gives you the ability, because of this right here, to hook it to any battery, even if the battery is by itself and not hooked to a vehicle. Now, it's not going to last you as long if you're not hooked to a vehicle, but it also gives you the ability to, you can take this and charge a phone, a laptop, use whatever you need off of a four-wheeler. You can use this off of a tractor. You can use it off of anything, okay? This will not do everything, okay? But this is a very handy option for very low cost, that if you combine something like this with a larger generator, that, maybe the larger generator helps take care of refrigerators and freezers, and this helps take care of things like keeping your phone charged and things like that, giving you a couple more options. It's cheap enough, you should keep it around, okay? But this right here, this is something that a lot of people should consider having as a backup right here. This is one of the largest power inverters right here that Everstart makes. Now, there are multiple brands of these. I don't know who is the best, but I do know that this one right here is really good. Like I said, I'm not being sponsored by them. I don't know if they're the best, but I know that they're good, and that's why I'm telling you about them, okay? And this is the one that I use and I'm familiar with. This is the 1500 watt power inverter, okay? I got this when we first moved over to this property. We didn't have any backup generators, okay? This gave me the ability to plug in to my truck, hook directly into the battery of my truck with these right here, okay? And I could turn my truck into a generator that I was able to, that's when we were first starting our business, I could use as a backup generator for our freezers, okay? I have way better backups now, but at that point, getting started, I didn't, okay? Not only that, I didn't have, the place was brand new. We just started the homestead and the business. It was fresh, okay? And I had no way of running things like big skill saws. And, back to the point about batteries, I had a battery pack skill saw, but we were cutting lots of wet, thick lumber. And I was running through batteries, and then I'd be just sitting around waiting for my batteries to charge. Number one, you can charge batteries. You can charge more batteries with this right here. Number two, I could run a big saw off of this right here, and I could use my truck, my big truck, or a tractor, and run my saw directly from my tractor or directly from my big truck, okay? I can also use this big inverter on a car or anything, really. Anything that is generating electricity and has a 12-volt battery. Obviously, do your own research on what you're specifically doing, but you can do that. Now, a couple points you want to be aware of is obviously you're only going to get your 1500 watts of power. I have run freezers on this. I use this as a backup generator to keep multiple freezers on at one time. When I was in a big bind, and we had several freezers that had to stay on, and we were able to use this one at a time, swapping them out, keeping each one cold long enough that we were able to save everything with this right here. So this right here has actually saved me more, and I think it only cost me $150 at the time, okay? Kind of pricey, but not when you think about how valuable it is. And the fact that I can carry it anywhere, anybody can carry it anywhere. Anybody can afford this. I would like to say that everybody should have this, but you don't have an excuse to not have this one. But this one right here is a really great option to have around. Now, not every vehicle is going to be able, like, just because this produces 1500 watts does not mean that you're necessarily going to be able to get the 1500 watts safely off of your vehicle. So, like if I hook this up to my wife's car and I try to draw this whole 1500 watts, watts is amps times volts, and that's your total, okay? But if I try to hook this to my wife's car, I don't remember the exact numbers, but my wife's car won't produce 1500 watts. So I'm not necessarily going to be able to do that. So if I'm trying to run enough stuff, which, just side note, our freezer does not even need the 1500 watts. But if I needed that, then my wife's car is not producing that, okay? But my pickup truck is, and my tractor is. So I've got no concern with this. I know how much my pickup truck and my tractor can run. And you can look all these specs up. That's why I'm not telling you exact numbers, because I don't know what truck, I don't know what vehicle. Typically you would want to look at the alternator output and see what that is. Okay, how many amps can it put out? And then do your math, your amps versus your volts. Okay, I mean your amps times your volts. And that would tell you what you need to know, whether or not your vehicle or the alternator that's on there would actually work. But here's the reason why I like these, even if you don't necessarily have a bigger truck like this or something like this, okay? If I was desperate for power, and say I wanted to run it directly off of this weld machine right here, because I mean I could hook it right up to the battery of this weld machine, and now I could get my same power off of this one. Let's say hypothetically, either this weld machine or my wife's car, let's say that they are unable, their alternator do not put out enough amps, okay? If they don't put out enough amps, but I need that many amps, I need the full 1500 watts, but the car alternator or the weld machine alternator doesn't put out enough amps to equal those watts, then it's still not the end of the world, because you're still going to produce your power, okay? It's just going to be hard. It's going to wear out your alternator, okay? So you need to be aware of that. If you're just wanting to run a saw for a project, not worth it, okay? If you're on the truck, you're fine. It's worth it. It's great, okay? But if you're on something that is going to be hard for your vehicle or for the alternator, then be aware of that. But there's cases where it might be worth it. If you're trying to save freezers full of meat, that's thousands of dollars, okay? So in my example, I had 3 vehicles, plenty backup vehicles. Let's just pretend for a minute, if I needed to run my wife's car and burn the alternator up, it would not burn up automatically, like really, really quickly. It would just wear the alternator out faster. Your alternator would die sooner, okay? If I needed to save $4,000 worth of meat in a freezer, plus the cost of the freezer, that is a lot cheaper than the $200 or $300 that it would cost you for that alternator, okay? Or, whatever your repair costs for that alternator to get that new alternator in. So my point is that even if all you had in this scenario was a vehicle with a alternator that was too small, and you were trying to run something like a freezer that's too big, in this scenario you still have the option, okay? You need to kind of know what you're looking at, and you need to kind of know what you're doing and understand, go ahead and do this stuff ahead of time. Decide which vehicle is going to be the best one. I know that either my big tractor or this truck is going to be my best option to run this on right here, okay? And where I would use this, a real life example is, I would have my miller, okay, 10,000 watt. I would have it running most of my stuff in my house. Wouldn't run everything, but it'd run most of it, okay? And then I would use something like this if I had, say I had one extra freezer that I just wasn't able to keep keep going, okay, freezer full of deer meat, okay, and I wasn't able to keep it going along with everything else, then I could use this, start my truck up, turn the freezer on for a couple hours, get it back cold again, and I'd probably be good, and then turn the truck back off and I'd be good to go. So just knowing those things in the back of your mind, those things are going to be huge backup things. All right, couple more things and then we're done. Number one, these power sources, even though they are portable, the downsides are you are the power man, okay? You're going to have to take care of this, even on something as nice as Generac or something like that. You're going to be the guy going out and taking care of this in the event that something really bad happens. If you have a more portable generator that's not hooked in, that's not a flip of a switch, then you're going to be the one filling up the gas. You're going to be the one taking care of those problems. So be aware of that and also be prepared, okay? Remember that. A lot of people mess up by they're having the generator, they're prepared for if something goes bad, but they're not prepared when the spark plug messes up. They don't have a spare spark plug, or they don't have enough gas to keep your generator going, or they don't have basic mechanic tools to kind of keep this generator going. Okay, so that's that one. This would have saved some of those people that I was talking about. This is just, all this is something that you can boost a battery off, okay? She could have gotten a full charge out of her battery on her car. This is a booster and an air compressor, okay? Now this is a cheap one. This is from Harbor Freight, okay? But I just wanted to show an option because even something as cheap as this can be super handy, okay? This has a light on front, a really nice light. You can make, it doesn't seem very light in here, but if you're on the side of the road, this right here has saved my butt way too many times. But this right here, it's going to keep your phone charged. It's going to give you some extra light. It's got somewhere where you can hook up all sorts of different powering options. You've got air so you can keep tires going down. Every single person in the winter or on the road should have some variant of this right here. You decide the brand, okay? And the very last thing that I wanted to talk about is these E-Pod, or these electric generators that they have. These are excellent options, not necessarily for everyone, but they have different, and I'm not going to tell you about any brands because I'm doing the research right now and I'm really deep into the research, but I haven't quite decided a brand. So y'all drop it in the comments, let me know the brand. But I want to tell you why these things are really, really good. Here's why. If I want, I'm building a little camper right now for me and my wife, a small camper. If I wanted to take this, I can power my whole camper with this battery bank with a solar. It's a solar battery bank. It's basically a battery, a charged generator right here. It's quiet, okay? But I can hook this into my little camper. And then, guess what? When I come back home, it's also a backup generator. I can pull that sucker out, take it into my house, and it's a backup generator. So that means I'm using it in every different direction. I'm not just building something in just my camper. It's a backup generator. It's an awesome vacation. It's money well spent for your vacations. It's multifunction. Plus it's very, very portable. But the last thing that I really like about these right here is that they're quiet, okay? And this is something I hadn't thought about in the past because I've never been like this huge doomsday type of person, okay? But I got to thinking about this. If you ever got into a situation where the world was in a bad place long enough and everyone was desperate and you were prepared and you had your gas generator running and everybody else was cold and hungry, they would hear your gas generator. So that option of that quiet electric generator, it's a decent option. So all I'm saying is they're really starting to come out with some good batteries and things like that. I'm going to do some more research into it. I think it's a great option to look into, but every single one of these are great options, and everybody, no matter who you are, should consider some type of inverter out there. If you like independence and you want to stay prepared, subscribe to the channel. That's what we're about.